Welcome to AVOXI's webinar series. Today we're joined by David Walker, 3Shape's Manager of Global Support Platforms and Processes. 3Shape is a global leader in 3D scanning technology and software for the dental industry. So a very important space within the healthcare market. And they have customers and operations spanning all around the world in dozens of countries. David, welcome, and thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Mike.
Like many companies of 3Shape size that we speak with, they've reached a point where their contact center technology and voice infrastructure needed to catch up with their growth. So today we're going to be talking about their contact center and voice migration they recently underwent, how they managed it, and what they learned along the way. So really excited to get your thoughts, David. Maybe just to kick off, can you tell us a bit about your role within 3Shape and the business overall, what it looks like from a global operations standpoint?
Sure, yes. So I'm relatively new to 3Shape, so 8 months in, and the role itself is also, you could say, quite a new role. So it sits between IT and support or global support, very much an operations hands-on role from the team that manages support, processes, platforms, anything to do with the tooling behind the scenes that our agents are working with. I would also say that the processes are a key element to the role, making sure that all of the processes that we have across the different tools are connected well, make a lot of sense for our agents. And in terms of the size and scope of the operation, so it's, as I mentioned, it's a global operation. We have offices in multiple locations, bigger operations in Ukraine and Colombia, but we also have operations around the world as well, smaller setups, but it of course means that we aim for a standardized approach from a centralized location for all of our offices globally.
Great, thanks, David. It is really interesting. As an aside, we are definitely seeing a lot of companies evolve their organizations and roles in terms of how they manage their contact center and technology and voice and all of these things that plug in together in a more modern cloud way. So it's really nice to see that 3Shape is a part of that. So let's talk about some of the recent migrations the organizations went through, both from a contact center software and a voice service perspective. So maybe before prior to that change, if you could speak to some of the big challenges or friction points the company was having in what it wanted to do in terms of supporting its customers across all of those markets you mentioned.
Sure. So I would probably look at three main points here when we think about the challenges that we were facing. And of course, it was not a small decision to make. And we were very much ahead of time in the planning for this. The key friction areas, I would say, were, one, there was the siloed tooling, the different tooling across the different locations that we needed to make sure that we had alignment. The second thing was the quality. That was one of the aspects that it was definitely high on the list of challenges that we had. And the third point being, we were really interested in developing a tool that would fit with our strategy, our long-term strategy, which is a strategy that takes us up to 2030. We have very big ambitions, and therefore we did need a partner that was aligned with our strategy, and hence we decided to make the move. Already now in the early stages, I think we are really past the half year in, and we have seen some really big successes with that move.
That's great. We'd love to dive into some of those more later on in the conversation. You started to talk about this, I think, but in thinking about the voice component of the solution, what were some of those things, if you could dive into a little more detail, that we're breaking down, and what was the actual impact of that to the company?
Sure, yeah. So I mean, I think if we're referring to the quality of voice, what I would say when I think about 3Shape, and as I mentioned in the beginning, I'm relatively new to 3Shape. I come from a somewhat different background in terms of support. And one of the things that surprised me most at 3Shape was the fact that a very high percentage of the contacts that are received in 3Shape are through voice channel. So it is the most critical channel for 3Shape. And we're talking way above kind of 90% of the requests. And so what that means is that it is absolutely critical that times that we do engage and interact with our customers, that the quality of the calls are very high. Of course, in some countries, we found that we had no problems, but because we support such a broad range of customers in different countries, we started to see that it was somewhat sporadic in one country. We had problems in other areas where I can't get into the technical details per se about what those issues were, but we just weren't able to resolve them. And I think what we saw were kind of fundamental things that we were not able to solve. And for that reason, the feedback that we were able to obtain from our customers, it was what's the word I'm looking for here? You could say that it was very frequent around the same issue.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, for us as a support organization within 3Shape, it's critical that we're able to communicate with our customers without any interruptions via the primary channel.
Makes sense. Any other challenges that were really driving a voice upgrade, or would you say quality was by far and away the top of the list?
I mean, quality was definitely the primary reason for this. I mean, I probably wouldn't say that this is challenges, but it definitely had an impact on the decision, and that was just being able to kind of leverage the providers out of the box functionality in many areas, which I think was maybe not a challenge, but more of a limitation for us. We had less ability to control calls or certain features that were not available to us that we knew would become available once we'd changed partner.
Right.
And so again, not so much a challenge, but limitations. We ran into many, and the whole purpose of making this move was, again, to kind of bring us in line with with our competitors, make sure we do have a competitive edge in our customer and yeah, that's what we have going forward from the change.
Yep. Got it. That's helpful. So just moving on to talk about the transition overall. Tell me about the process. How was it? How complex was it? How did you work to manage that complexity and get to the finish line from a transition perspective?
In my experience, I would say was complex. That's of course because of so I think especially when we look across Europe, our European region. It's multi-language, it's multi-skilled, which of course, the first step with the language will always add complexity. And to add an additional layer onto that with the skills setup and across 30 plus markets, the complexity was great. I think one of the things that you could say simplified it was that we did already move from an existing tool, and the intention wasn't to change, the entire setup. The idea was to kind of utilize the setup that we knew. You could even say have a like-for-like setup. I know that can also be a trap because we didn't want to implement the old system into a new system, for example. So we tried to avoid that, but generally the fundamentals were already there as we would have liked them. And the idea as well was to ensure that it was the least disruptive for our support organization. However, complexity-wise, to actually implement, it was a new tool. We didn't necessarily have the skills in-house and the knowledge in-house of the new tool. We, of course, had our expert vendors to work with us. And that, of course, decreased the complexity on our side, on having to kind of understand and figure out where everything needed to go in order to work. So we had a really good connection during that period. And it was it was also a relatively short transition period, which, of course, looking back in hindsight, it could have been longer. I guess many people always want more time. We definitely kind of pushed through due to the timing of everything, but all in all, it worked out in the end.
Great recap. Thanks, David. On the voice, from a voice end of things, was consolidation something that you had decided on as an organization from the start, or is that a concept that emerged as you went through the process of looking at what was available in the market?
No, I think generally we were interested in the consolidation factor here. I think one thing I would say, our industry in general, it is relatively complex. And the thing that we were looking to achieve was to kind of lessen this complexity overall. So from the beginning, the idea was to consolidate the entire voice setup into a single tool that could be managed from a central team.
Great. And so what in doing that, you mentioned the timeline pressure and the push. What are some of your thoughts around the relationship with AVOXI during that transition period that helped support that?
I would say that we had a very close collaboration during that period. I think so just to put some context into the spot that we were in at that point, we had a challenge with our provider at the time, basically because certain numbers were not available in certain countries. And of course, going back to the point I mentioned earlier, the idea was to consolidate. So when we established that wasn't possible, we of course needed to find a solution for that. And that was relatively last minute, you could say. So we really needed the support from AVOXI during that period. Firstly, because we didn't really have the internal expertise to understand the full scope of what was required for this consolidation as well. The requirements for obtaining numbers is something we definitely underestimated in our setup. So I can't really comment on the US. I think that the US and Canada was relatively straightforward for us. But when we looked at APAC, when we looked at some of the European regions, the requirements for obtaining the numbers that we wanted were a lot stricter than we'd anticipated. And working with AVOXI during that period just really simplified that process for us. Of course, with the structure of our business as well, we have different leaders in regional areas. We also have leaders that are actually kind of responsible for the business in those areas. So the documentation needed to come from many different places, and kind of having that support, firstly, to understand what were the requirements, and then also working with those carriers and providers on making sure that those documents were delivered, and any questions that arose from there were picked up quickly and resolved quickly. And I think without AVOXI, we certainly wouldn't have made the projected timeline for the project.
Great. And so moving on to post-implementation, you alluded to this at the top, but one of the maybe not challenges, but limitations you felt previously was voice control. And so I'd love to dive into some of the capabilities that you feel like are helping unlock the business in terms of from a software end of things and control of voice. I know one of the more advanced features you're using from AVOXI is our intelligent caller ID, where we are using AI to automatically select the most optimal phone number to display on a call. Can you walk us through the problem your agents had before you were using that, and what are some of the benefits you've experienced?
Yeah, sure. I think if you think about, especially in some of the European markets, we have agents that support multiple countries, multiple languages. So when it comes to utilize outbound calling from the CCAS tool, there's actually a step within there which requires an agent to select the appropriate number that they're calling to, rather that they're calling from. And the reason that we do that is because we want to ensure that we're calling from the same country that the customer is in. Otherwise, we have the challenge of this kind of, well, I mean, there's two challenges to that really that we started to see, which was firstly, the trust element. If I'm a Swedish customer, Swedish practice, and somebody's calling me from a Dutch number, I wouldn't answer it. I'd think, what is this? And so, of course, what we did, what we were able to see initially, and this was what triggered the initial investigation, was that why aren't customers picking up our calls? This was the common factor. Was when they did pick up the calls, there was always some potential issues with quality because we're calling from this number. It doesn't make sense to call from this country to this number. So ideally, what we needed to do was make sure that our agents selected the right number, but that's not always possible. We're making outbound calls all day, every day. It's a very easy thing to slip, just to change a number in the UI. And so what AVOXI were able to deliver for us here was the ability to not have to make that selection. So even though from a UI standpoint, I'm calling from the same number all day, every day, and I might be calling 5 different countries, what AVOXI is doing for us there is selecting the number based on the country that's being called. And of course, that solves all of our problems. It solves the quality issue, it solves the trust issue, and it also solved the challenge of having to have one extra manual click for. So all in all, it was a big win for us.
Thanks, David. Now that you've completed the migration, you mentioned that certain things were done like for like, and at the same time you're looking to progress to your long-term strategy. So what has changed for 3Shape operationally so far?
For 3Shape operationally, I think what we've done and what we've been able to do. So this change has definitely been an enabler for us. We've been able to kind of plan much further ahead with I guess high level, it would be more channel strategy. So as I mentioned before, of course, we do love to talk to our customers on the phone. It is, and I think will be for many years to come, the primary channel. But ideally, we would like to reduce the dependence on that channel. And what this migration has done is it's opened up options for us. So of course, we're now investigating and on the timeline additional channels. We of course will be leveraging AI, which of course we don't take the approach that we expect to solve 40-50% of our requests that way, but we look at it definitely more as a solve the very basic requests very quickly without the need to interact, if that's the case. And we could be looking at around 5-10% of requests, so it's not a huge push for us. But of course, different channels such as messaging, being able to communicate, especially like communicate and engage with our customers, especially with our customer type. Our customers are busy. They have clients of their own. And we want to make sure that at least the intention is not to drive our customers through a different route for our benefit, but also just to provide the options for our customers of what suits you best. And we believe that engaging via messaging would be a really good fit for our customer base. We do have social channels where our customers are, and we want to provide the options as well to engage via social media, and also be able to listen via social media. So these are some of the things that has opened up for us. What I mean by listening is what are our customers saying? What are they saying about our products? And these are the doors that have opened with this recent migration.
That makes a lot of sense. Sounds like you're being very pragmatic about how you're thinking about those channels. As a patient of dentist, if you guys, if you can send a quick text message to answer a question about the scanner to get me out of the chair a little faster. We'll
Exactly.
What has it meant on the voice side of things, beyond some of the features, to have a single consolidated platform in AVOXI to support your needs?
I think again, it has simplified, and I think there are multiple reasons for that. Also, the fact that we've managed to consolidate within 3Shape as an organization. So when we're consolidating tooling, we're of course consolidating it within a consolidated group, which just simplifies the steps internally. I think what it's allowed us to do as well is have more control over some of the initiatives, some of the ideas that come up. I think a good example of that would be being able to, so we of course have the commercial ideas where, should we segment our customers? Should we provide a bespoke service for for certain customer segments. And actually what this has enabled is kind of the technical side of being able to achieve that. So initiatives that, kind of being able to move from idea to action quickly. I think those were the things that we were struggling with in the past. One of the things that I always advocate for is experiments, because the thing with tooling scattered around in different teams, or maybe lack of development resources, which is kind of the standard. It's very difficult to experiment, and I see a consolidation like this, tooling, for example, sitting within a consolidated team. It allows us to experiment with certain initiatives, and if it works, fantastic, great proof of concept. We can start to look at scaling it and what that would take. If it doesn't work, it's out, we move on. And that's, I think, one of the keys for me and for our team here, to be able to move forward sustainably.
That's great. It sounds like, from your perspective, yes, on the one hand, there's AVOXI as the partner, but another important piece of that is just how you've, back to the top, how you've structured yourselves internally to sort of move a bit faster maybe than you could have in the past.
Exactly. And, it's a good point. So we get to focus on different things now. And I think that's one of the things that often maybe isn't highlighted, that of course in previous years we've been focused on the quality of the calls, some of the challenges, the inability to move, and so what this setup has done is it's taken those pain points away and allowed us to kind of focus on moving forwards.
That's great. So just a few more questions to close out. Moving forward, you talked about some of the investigations around new channels to seed into your customer experience strategy. Anything else you'd highlight in terms of plans to further optimize your solution or operations?
Yeah, I think, other than what I've mentioned, the idea of this solution now is that we're able to scale, and my focus area here would be customer support. It's the biggest operation. It's within 3Shape, but of course we have other teams. We have success managers. We have our sales teams. We have other teams within the building that could definitely leverage the same setup that we have, or that we're using across our customer support organization. And so that's also, those are some of the areas that we'll look into, not just optimize, but leverage the tooling and the setup that we've implemented across our support organization. And so what that will allow us to do as well is kind of connect the dots between success, sales, customer support, and kind of have an integrated experience across all channels, not just the channels available for our customers, but also our internal channels.
Great. And for a peer, at a similar company or situation as 3Shape with global operations going through a migration like this, is there anything, any tips or thing you wish you knew going in that you could share?
What I would suggest here is, of course, select the right partners, number one. But going into something like a migration of this size would be to be very hands-on. A background like mine and most of the people within 3Shape is low technical backgrounds. We, of course, have highly skilled teams within 3Shape. actually being as hands-on as possible from start to end, and I'm probably focusing here more on understanding the technical architecture and how everything works and how everything fits in. I think that would be my biggest recommendation, to be as involved as possible. And solely, not necessarily because of the migration itself, but because of post-migration and because of being able to support an organization once everything has been kind of signed off and completed. So that would be my biggest recommendation.
Great. And one final question: as you continue to expand globally and, as you said, evolve the customer experience strategy and channels, how do you see the voice infrastructure needing to evolve with that?
I think, again, going back to a comment or the point I mentioned earlier about understanding who your customers are, understanding differentiated service, or being able to differentiate service and focus on certain customer segments at the same time as not removing the need to service all customers, of course. It would be more data-driven insights from voice, for example. Being able to what I can say here is being able to connect the data between the systems that are being used. So if you think about your kind of underlying CRM tooling, for example, being able to connect the routing, the voice interactions that are inbound, outbound, it doesn't matter, to the master record, and being able to kind of gather insights and analytics from areas for the purpose of, I guess this would just be one example of kind of being able to provide that differentiated service, or being able to identify who your customer is. I don't think these are, I would say these are definitely not new things. Like I was reading about these things many years ago, about kind of understanding your customer and actually knowing who they are at the point of entry. So it's definitely not a new thing, but I think for many organizations with a very complex structure and architecture and setup, it's challenging to get that. So that would be my take on that point.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. I mean, we can get caught up in all of the great innovations of things like AI, which obviously enable a lot, but you have to get the fundamentals right, and it comes back to those core business strategies and principles. I think that's a very astute observation of where to focus, for sure, especially right now.
Exactly.
Well, David, this has been incredibly valuable. Just really appreciate you taking the time to share your experience. I mean, again, I think this was a interesting story, not just about technology, but how strategy and process and just good planning came together to obviously make this a successful transition for 3Shape and set you well up for the future. So thank you again.
Of course. Thank you too.
And so for those watching, of course, I'd be remiss if I didn't say, if you see any parallels in your own voice management challenges, we'd love to continue the conversation. So please visit our website at AVOXI.com to learn more about our solutions. You can, of course, always connect with our sales team at sales@avoxi.com to discuss any specific needs. Thank you all for joining us, and we'll speak with you soon.